Hello
Hello
there.
there! Welcome back to another episode of Star Wars in the Galaxy, watching all the Star Wars we can get our hands on. I'm Eli.
I'm Jacob.
This is episode 46. This is the first episode of season 6 of Star Wars in the Galaxy, where we are watching season 3, mostly, of Star Wars The Clone Wars. We are starting with episodes 5, 6, and 7, because who needs math, of season 3. They are Corruption, the Academy, and Assassin are the 3 episodes. Yeah,
Yes.
we should just get into it, don't you think?
Absolutely. I'm super excited. Talking
Yeah.
about season 2, talking about the ending of that. It got me super hyped for season 3. So even though
Yeah,
this isn't the technical exact start, I'm thrilled nonetheless. Let's pop
absolutely.
right in. The first episode we have is Corruption. Quick summary. We see Padme Amidala taking a visit to Mandalore and getting a big parade, a Mandalorian welcome from Duchess Satine. Unbeknownst to them, behind the scenes, some smugglers land on Mandalore and end up kind of bribing and coercing their way into putting a toxic diluting agent called slabin into the vats of the Mandalorian tea. And this ends up poisoning a whole school full of children and triggering a massive controversy where we end up finding out how many just how many members of the Mandalorian government and law enforcement are totally corrupt and are bribing people and being bribed. But they do in the end catch the smugglers and get the antidote. But it is a very sobering moment nonetheless for Satine and her court.
Absolutely. Okay, let's get to our fortune cookie, which is the challenge of hope is to overcome corruption. Now, before we even get to like what that means, I got a bone to pick with this fortune cookie. I hate when fortune cookies have the name of the episode in it.
Really?
It
Yeah.
feels like cheating to me. It feels like, you know, when songs try to rhyme a word with itself. Like
Yeah,
you have the word heart and you rhyme it with heart or something like that. That's what this feels like to me. It feels extremely lazy, but whatever. It's semantics for me.
yeah, I mean it's not the greatest.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I mean I can definitely see this played out in the episode. It really reminds me of Lucas's messages, and what George Lucas kind of put in there in
Yeah.
Attack of the Clones and the Phantom Menace, especially how he's trying to point out how greed and corruption can kind of bring down a government and erode trust in institutions. So I thought that was a pretty cool. It felt like a callback to that and kind of an homage to
Yeah.
what George Lucas did in many ways with the prequel trilogy.
Yeah. This does feel like a very it has that prequel politics feel, but far more clear and far more like it makes a lot more sense than it does in the prequels.
Yeah, I think for me it feels as though it feels more overt in these episodes, I guess,
Yeah.
as we'll talk about, but it feels more like it hits the nail on the head, whereas with the prequel trilogy, you know, we see a lot of subtle and not so subtle maybe references. For example, Newt Gunray sounds an awful lot like Newt Gingrich. That's one
And
I
Ronald
always think
Reagan, don't
of.
remember that one. Don't forget that one. Yeah. The political themes in both these episodes, Corruption and the Academy, Assassin not as much, but still there's stuff there, is very, very prevalent. Um, yeah, the challenge of hope is to overcome corruption. In over to get past corruption, you need for people to put others first, who may need it more than themselves. It harkens back to, Anakin in Phantom Menace. This is the biggest problem in this universe is that nobody helps one another.
Absolutely, yeah.
And not to get too crazy of a movie, I know that people generally do not like, but man, the fleet coming in the Rise of Skywalker. I mean, that is people coming to help right there. Anyway, rant about Rise of Skywalker over.
Yeah, I
But
thought it
still,
was.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
But still, the idea of sometimes this is a problem I go back and forth with on the prequels. Half the time I think it's genius, and half of the time I think it's stupid. which is that half the time the corruption to me in the prequels and in the Clone Wars era stuff seems too cartoony. Then I realize how inspired by the real world it is and how exaggerated it isn't. You know what I mean? How much they're
Yeah,
not exaggerating it, and then I'm like, okay, maybe.
absolutely. I think one thing that I think is especially prescient to today in this episode is not maybe not necessarily just the straight up corruption, but the way that corruption flourishes as people's faith in the government and faith in longstanding institutions kind of evaporates and erodes. You know, you see more people make the choice of, yeah, I don't have to be upstanding because like I don't have to uphold the laws. What's in it for me? You know, this
Yeah.
government doesn't have my back.
Hey,
And we
challenge to
definitely
all
see
our
that.
listeners quickly. If I may, count how many times we say corruption in this episode.
Oh
How
my
how
gosh,
many
there's gonna be
times we say that
dozens.
word? Shout out to the amazing Schmodown faction, by the way. KORRUPTIO. And corruption. My personal Schmodown faction. I putting that out of the way.
We see Padme touchdown, and she immediately gets the Mandalorian welcome. And one thing that I think is
Yeah.
very telling that kind of loops back to some of the Mandalore episodes in season 2 of the Clone Wars is when she says, "I want to show you the new Mandalore," and kind of
Yeah.
references pacifist Mandalore. But I think this just shows in a big spectacular way how the facade of New Mandalore remains with Satine's government. You know, she even says when they're riding through, of course we have a big parade. We are a
We're
people of
people of
tradition.
tradition.
Yeah,
Yes, that line was too good.
that line was too good because just like last season, we see how she ignores the dark sides of the Mandalorian tradition, and she thinks that just because a peaceful government is in power, maybe this isn't the problem as much, or maybe this will kind of dissipate. But you know, clearly it doesn't. And until season 4 and season 5, when Mandalore is engulfed in radicalism and fear, they kind of live in a little bit of an idealist way.
Yeah.
So this feels ridiculously timely for the United States, but I don't want to get too much into
I
that and derail us.
I I was thinking about what you were saying about the whole Mandalorian welcome thing, and I wrote this down. I'm sure you felt this based on what you said about it so far. Did the Mandalorian welcome feel a little bit too perfect for you?
Yeah, it
It
made me
it
think like
it
how
felt
many of
like
those
something bad
people,
was just about to happen.
yeah, how many of those people are accepting in the parade or how accepting bribes, or you know, while everyone's off at the parade, how much shady
That's what
business
I
is
was
being
going with.
conducted.
I'm like, there's something going on here, isn't there?
Yeah. And I think in a darker sense also, how many of those people who are cheering on Satine are then only a few seasons later, probably less than a year or two in Star Wars chronology,
Cheering for her
are going to be
death.
cheering on the Death Watch, cheering on Pre Vizsla while he says like the old Mandalore is back, and they're up on the balcony with their
Yeah,
jetpacks and they're
because
waving
those
their
people
guns in
are
the air.
swayed way too easily. It's what we've seen.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a
Mm,
very interesting idea, but
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
So I want to talk specifically about why this corruption exists, what the political situation is on Mandalore in this two-part arc, which I think is for somebody who, like a lot of people felt annoyed by the lack of explanation of the politics in the prequels. This was explained really well, in my opinion. So what I got, tell me if I got anything wrong. Due to the war and Mandalore's continued neutrality in said war, neither the Republic nor the Separatists are opening trade with Mandalore, so they have to be completely self-dependent, or as Olmec's going to say, rely completely on the black market for trade.
yes,
Yeah. It's a really interesting situation. And another thing I want to point out is how confident Padme is. She's like, this is gonna be fine. The Senate's gonna give you support. The Senate's gonna do the right and moral thing, like the hundreds of times they've failed to do that in this war. I'm sorry,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
why
yeah.
does
It's
Padme
insane.
think the Senate's gonna do anything? She, if anyone, knows how, like, Palpatine says in Phantom Menace, the Senate is full of greedy, squabbling delegates. There's no interest in the common good. She knows this firsthand. Her planet got friggin' invaded by a bunch of Nemoidian grubs. What she think's gonna happen? It's shocking to me of Pat, in Phantom Menace, Palpatine says to the Nemoidians, Queen Amidala is young and naive. It's 11, 12 years later, what's changed? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is that maybe she feels like she has to put the Republic's best foot forward, and she's really trying to do everything she can um, to help out Mandalore, and even if that means kind of maybe being a little idealistic and taking a long shot in terms of getting help for Mandalore, I think that may be part of it. And also I think this can kind of relate to often geopolitics a little bit, where let's say that the Republic functions a little bit like a giant country, we might say, with its national government. A lot of times people will rag and rag and rag on their own country, but then also at the same time, if an outsider says something insulting or talks down, you will kind of, people will get pissed off. I know I'll get pissed off, even if I'll be talking all day about how much I hate the politics of my country, and then someone else says something like, "What did you say? What did you say?" So I think that maybe a little bit of that same dynamic applies here, where even though Padme knows all the bad things, she's still trying to put the Republic's best foot forward to get help for Mandalore. So I can understand where she's coming from, but I also see how it would make Satine kind of wary of the Republic.
Also, I love this scene when Satine's talking with Olmec and her advisors in her palace. With when Padme's there, that scene is really interesting. I love that when Padme steps in and she's like, we can help you fix the corruption here. They're like, listen, lady, you come from the Republic.
Yeah.
I made an analogy. Coming from the Republic and lecturing about corruption is basically the same as Darth Maul lecturing about embracing death.
Yeah.
It's true, though.
It is. It is.
You can't do it without looking like a complete and utter hypocrite.
That's true, but at the same time, I think there is something to be said for kind of understanding that whataboutism will only take you so far,
Yeah.
Like I don't know. There comes a point where you have to say, if there's something wrong at a certain point, you gotta try and fix it, no matter if someone else is calling it wrong, who is also doing something wrong.
And we actually get that, the whole there's that line, I told Senator Amidala that Mandalore remained free from the war, yet here I find a battle in my own palace. It's that whole thing about government red tape. You know what I mean? There's too much deliberation and too little actual action. You know what I mean? There's that
definitely reminds me of the prequel trilogy and how they were always talking about, the Senate never does anything, they just set up subcommittees.
And like in Phantom Menace, in Phantom Menace, when Amidala says to, I think it's Palpatine, the courts take even longer to decide things than the Senate, and we just all look around and we're like, the Senate's taking forever. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
And we see that
isn't there doesn't Lot Dodd say that in Supply Lines also or something? Where
I also think he does say that. Also, there's that there's that throwaway line that's incredible from Attack of the Clones, where C.O. Bibble says that Newt Gunray is still the vice president of the Trade Federation after 4 trials in the court.
Yeah.
4
and
trials.
I think that just goes to show, there's a lot of corruption and a lot of, what's the word? Not stagnation. You get the gist.
Deliberation. There's a lot of deliberation. Here's a couple other things before we get directly to the hospital. Very shortly before, when they're diluting the tea with the Slavin. First of all, did you catch what color Slavin is? It's
It's red,
beautiful.
right?
What?
The red?
It's red, which is the color of the dark side. That is just beautiful symbolism right there. This is the most interesting part of this episode. The smugglers, who, by the way, they were designed after ancient Egyptians, right? That's not just me, right?
Yeah, I think they definitely had that look to them, like in some of the paintings and carvings with
Yeah,
the
like
headgear
come
and
on,
whatnot.
that was too obvious, wasn't it? To
Yeah.
me at least. But anyway, I thought they were working for the separatists.
No, I thought that that's a
They aren't. They aren't.
possibility.
They aren't.
They
They aren't.
aren't.
But I thought before they were working for the separatists.
Oh, how
It's
come?
I don't know. It's just like a. It's like a. It's that's assumption.
Yeah.
Um,
They always
we
love to
make
make the separatists like green aliens, so it kind of makes sense to assume that, I guess.
no. I was just thinking like they were hired out by the separatists to do this thing.
Yeah,
Not that they.
that's a possibility.
Yeah, I
Like
don't
it
think.
could.
I don't think it actually is true, but like it's interesting to see somebody pulling the strings behind the scenes that's not working for Dooku or Palpatine.
Yeah.
There's that conversation that Padme and Satine have at dinner before they see the hospital. First one. There are times where I wish I could follow Mandalore's lead, neutrality, and not just in the war. And what I thought, first, I thought two things. Number one, not just the war. And then Satine replies, but the politics as well. And I followed them. Not just the war, but the
But the
politics and
politics.
the customs too.
Oh, oh my
They're
gosh.
like civilized people. So I followed them like civilized people. Also, I love the fact that Padme says she wants to follow Satine's customs, and then Obi-Wan, if we flash back to the last arc, says, "Had you said the word, I would have left the Jedi Order." It shows us how strong of a person ideologically Satine is when two people that she is very close with both admit that she's right in everything she does and that they want to follow her. You know what I mean? Not everything. That's a little exaggeration, but like, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the hospital, the first kind of shot where we pan through and we just see all the sick children is just so powerful because I
Yeah.
don't know the way that they set it, the way that they set it up, the build up, and that feels like this scene, I should say, feels like the payoff of this build up that we have with the various scenes with the smuggler showing like him like taking the bribe and kind of positioning himself to take a bribe, and then showing the other guy say, "Isn't it toxic?" The T operator, I guess, the tank operator, and them saying, "Not in the right dose, get it right," and forcing him to put it in the slab. And it's so powerful because it kind of feels like, you thought these things weren't that bad. Boom, there you go. A hospital filled with sick children. It felt as though it were directly saying, this is the result of greed.
Yeah.
Money is the most dangerous weapon. Look at what it's done.
I isn't there a line in like one of these two episodes that the
Yes,
most
yes.
dangerous weapon is money in the
It's in
galaxy is
this
money,
weapon, yeah.
Captain?
Satine says it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's later in this episode. Yeah. It's really it's a really good payoff. I agree with you. The most interesting thing that happens here is Olmec. Olmec's reaction to this is really interesting because he doesn't care about the children. He cares about the politics. Um, I'm gonna reference again one of my favorite other geek properties out there, which is the Harry Potter franchise. Um, Olmec in this case reminds me of Cornelius Fudge, who repeatedly ignores the threat of Voldemort so that he can keep his job. Um, when really acknowledging the threat of Voldemort and preparing the Wizarding World for chaos would have made him a hero. Dumbledore even says it himself to him. And that it reminds me of Olmec in this case because, if Olmec were really truly worried about the sick children, he would keep his job so much easier than if he were spending all that time worrying about keeping his job.
Yeah.
Here's a funny coincidence in the show. specifically with Mandalore, but also just generally, if a villain, if we don't know somebody is bad, the key thing to show us that they're bad in this arc is them conveniently running away when the heroes get too close to figuring out the truth.
Oh yeah,
It happened last
oh.
Mandalore arc too. Like, what's like, that is so not smart. It's like an instant giveaway that that guy's a bad guy. You know what I mean? The first school superintendent. It's like, it's ridiculous.
It must be a Mandalore thing though. It must be a Mandalorian thing.
Yeah,
Because
Satine should really get that checked
see
out.
that twice. Yeah, she should.
Yeah,
We should send out a memo to the police to say if someone runs away, like just go after them. Because then
just keep going.
Just ignore everyone else. If someone runs away, clearly they're the prime suspect now. Everyone else is on the sidelines now.
When they find out, like, when they start going down the chain of who's corrupt in this, their confessions are hilarious to me. The first guy's like, I might be guilty. And they're like, you disgusting human being, how could you? There are other people who are worse, though. That makes it better, right? I'm like, no, man, that does not make it better. And then the next guy was like, sure, I bribed the school official. What's the problem?
Yeah, that one to me was shocking. I couldn't. How could he not be arrested then and there?
Yeah, that was. I mean, as you have to tell, it just goes to show the things that people think they can get away with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, that guy was running a straight business out of that stuff. You know what I mean? Like, that guy was lying back in his chair, like that kind of thing, It was made clear, at least to me, that he had been doing this whole corrupt business operation thing for quite a long time. This was not a new venture, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Also about this episode is how we got to see, I feel like we got to see a different side of Satine, She kind of went ham in this episode. She was intense here, and she was very intense. The way she was just kind of interrogating people, getting really angry. Usually she's so even keeled. I guess not with Obi-Wan. And
I was about to say, when she's arguing with Obi-Wan, so even keeled. But I mean, really hear it in her calm tone when she said the sarcasm of a soldier.
But I mean, to be fair, this feels different just because she's out, and it seems like she's almost on the line of maybe giving up her non-violence,
Yeah.
That I thought that was interesting, and I would have liked to see them push that a bit more and maybe see what happens to her. But I still think it was a cool development. But I guess that brings us to one of the aspects of Satine kind of maybe going a bit wild, which is, why did she order the warehouse to be burned?
To be burned, yes. So I think it was as a symbol thing.
Yeah, just saying, like, we're not messing around anymore.
This is what happens to corruption here on Mandalore. You want to be next? I mean, it's actually quite a fear tactic, which seems almost like the opposite of what Satine would do. I think Satine realizes that under such a harsh environment, sure, the bad guys have been captured, but where were they doing this all? Mandalore. She wants to make Mandalore a no corruption zone, a corruption-free zone. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
so,
I think that's what it is. That leads me to one of my favorite things of this episode, when Satine asked Almec what he's gonna do about this. He says, "I'm setting up a committee to look into it." And you know what that reminded me of?
What?
I was not elected to watch my people die while you discussed this invasion in a committee.
Oh, yeah.
Padme was sitting right across from him. This is the red tape thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Olmec, as we're gonna find out next episode, may not be the best guy. And delaying a condemnation of the black market in such a way seems perfect for that next episode, which we're gonna get into.
One cool thing that I found out, though, trivia wise, was that the bottles of tea, they Erties on them.
What?
the bottles of tea that the children are drinking in this
Yeah.
episode say Artie's on them. Who is Artie? I don't know, but
Do
this
they
was the
have the
same
beats?
drink. They have the teas. They have
They
the
have the tea.
Artie's. We have the Slavin.
Arties, we have the tea.
No, but this was what made this interesting to me is that this is the same drink that originally Obi-Wan was supposed to order at Dex's diner in Attack of the Clones. Of course, then they changed that to Jawa juice.
Yeah.
Why they did, I don't know. What is Jawa juice? Is that offensive to Jawas? Can Jawas drink Jawa juice? Is it actually made of Jawas? There's a lot of questions there.
Another thing I was thinking of is
know.
If for a Jawa juice, it may just look like a Jawa. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It may be like, I don't know. It may look like a Jawa. I don't know how it would look like a Jawa. Anyway, in the academy, spurred on by the events of corruption in which children are poisoned due to government corruption, Satine decides the best course of action is for Ahsoka Tano to teach a class to the young Mandalorian leaders of the future in the Royal Mandalorian Academy on corruption. Ahsoka teaches this class. A group of young people led by Corgi Kenobi. Sorry. Korkie Kryze.
I see what you did there.
I made 2 references in there. Did you catch both of them?
Oh, I don't know if I caught the first one.
Corgi. Do you remember from our stream?
Oh, forgive me. Oh. When will it end?
I'm calling this guy Corgi Kenobi until I die.
Corgi Kenobi.
Anyway.
Corgi Kenobi until the day we die. Okay, fine.
Anyway, so a group led by Korkie, who is Satine's nephew, break into a Mandalorian warehouse, and they find a pretty shady meeting. They go report it to Satine, who says, "Yeah, get over yourselves.
Yeah,
this is
she
fine."
She was not very sympathetic at first.
Then they go to Almec, who reveals he is behind this whole thing. Has them. Ahsoka makes a plan, has them fake captured. Eventually, she frees them, and they. And in the face of having Satine sign a confession to her quote treasonous ways, they instead imprison Almec for his treasonous ways of using the black market against the Mandalorian people. Yeah, there's more details in the episode that we'll figure out, but that's the nuts and bolts. The fortune cookie we're looking at is those who enforce the law must obey the law.
This is an interesting fortune cookie because for me, I can think of a hell of a lot of ways that this isn't true in our universe in real life, but go on.
They're not
Star
saying
Wars.
It is true.
Go on, Filoni. Go ahead.
They're not saying
wrong.
It is true. They're saying it should be true.
Yes, that could be the case. That could well be the case.
And I agree. You know, it's the whole nobody is above the law sort of thing. The law is made for a reason, for people to follow it for the betterment of society. You, of course, can and should change those laws if they get outdated or don't work, or if they are hurting people. But if they're doing none of those things, you should obey the law. You know, I was thinking about Palpatine, you know, emergency powers and delegations and, you know, all this stuff to give himself more power. And if he eventually just says screw it and turns the Republic into an empire, that's not putting himself at the same level as the law. That's putting himself above the law, which is exactly what this episode is advocating against. This is, you know, how the Republic turns into the empire, is that, you know, politicians give themselves so much power and everyone just sits back and goes, yeah, fine, okay, sure.
I think this does get proven true by in a sort of broader cyclical karmic sense, you know, even if you don't face consequences directly, if you are someone who is supposed to be enforcing the law and you're not obeying the law yourself, you know, in the long run, trust in you and your enforcement of the law will erode over time. Oh gosh, take a shot for every time I've said the trust will erode or the trust has eroded in this episode. My goodness.
Hey, if you say it 20 more times this episode, you will still have not said it as much as you've said the Jedi have lost their way in the history of this show. So.
True. Forgive me. Oh my goodness. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. But anyway, I think that overall, I do think you can still inevitably face consequences if what you do comes to light. That being said, though, I think that this is definitely a bit more of an idealistic way to see things. Of you, maybe it's a bit more of a you have to obey the law, like you should not.
Again, you gotta think of what these fortune cookies are made for. I don't think we had this discussion. We should. You know, there's that line Lucas said, I made Star Wars for 12-year-olds. These fortune cookies, above everything else, are little pieces of wisdom for 12-year-olds. That's what they are.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, you know, setting them up with this idea of how the law works and how people who enforce the law should operate is nothing but, in my opinion, a good idea. So
I think we get a pretty I don't know, I don't want to call it boilerplate, but I think we get a pretty surface level examination of corruption in the form of Ahsoka's little a lecture that she gives.
Actually, I actually kind of disagree. There's a line about corruption that's fascinating to me, and I thought you would have lost your mind at, but maybe you didn't see this meaning, which is, you know, like, that sounded pompous, but what I meant was, like, maybe you didn't catch this. There's that line, but temptation is always there, and citizens must be vigilant so corruption can't take root. I looked at that line and I'm like, wait, is this line about corruption or is this line about the Jedi and the dark side?
Yeah, I mean, you could see it that way. I think that Ahsoka kind of has to face some of these similar corruption-oriented questions in this episode, so it's not just about Mandalore, I think.
Yeah, it's like, you know, temptation to the dark side is always there, and we must be vigilant in order to keep ourselves from slipping too often. Like, that's the reasonable way of the Jedi. That's the way the Jedi are supposed to be. That's the way Ahsoka will later view the Jedi, or at least what they're supposed to be. Ahsoka's entire speech on corruption sounds like her exposing the flaws within the prequel Jedi. But I'm reading too much into that, right? Right? Quote, the Jedi lost their way, Jacob, right?
This kind of corruption message also applies to Ahsoka, not necessarily in the fact that she's gonna go to the dark side in these episodes, but, you know, she finds herself at one point kind of maybe being a little bit too passive and kind of forgetting what it means to be a Jedi, because she's constantly being told, you know, be patient, be patient, be patient. Don't step in, don't do anything rash, stay out of trouble, by Ahsoka and Anakin. Although Anakin is
Obi-Wan
probably quite.
And Anakin.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, Obi-Wan and Anakin. Even though Obi-Wan is probably, or Anakin is probably a bit of a hypocrite for telling her that, to the point where is it Korkie, or maybe says you sound like my aunt. Aunt in quotation marks. You sound like my Aunt Satine. I thought you were a Jedi Knight. I think side note, I think it's kind of funny how many people in this episode refer to Ahsoka as a Jedi Knight and a Jedi Master. I don't think Mace Windu would be.
I was about to say, first of all, citizen. Second of all, look what happens to her master.
I know. I mean, let's just be glad that Mace Windu isn't here to correct them, because that would not be pretty.
That would not be pretty. You know that image of people having like the explosions in their eyes.
Yeah,
that's Mace Windu right now.
That's Mace Windu. He's gonna go off.
He's gonna go off. No, yeah. My favorite thing is how much the Jedi in this episode. This is an interesting thing. You know, the public is supposed to be losing their trust in the Jedi during the prequel trilogy, because that's what Palpatine wants to do, and he's still doing that. But like, you know, but on such, like, you know, worlds like Mandalore, the Jedi are still treated with a quite large amount of reverence. You know, there's that I hate to bring it around to this movie because Jacob's gonna dislike me for the next 30 seconds.
No, I'm not.
But you know, because I was Luke Skywalker, Jedi Master, because I was a legend. You know, there's that idea of the idealization of the Jedi, of the legend of the Jedi, of the, you know, and we
definitely
see that in practice here, you know.
I think, you bring up a really good point. We see it in practice, but you know, one thing I want to point out is that there's probably a lot of disconnection and maybe differences between the mythology of the Jedi and what the Jedi represent in terms of the stories that have been passed down and kind of the way they've been ingrained into the imagination of the galaxy versus the political reality of who they are and what they're doing at the time of the Clone Wars. Also, clearly, I think it's probably I'm guessing, been pretty politicized by this point within the galaxy, and it's probably a political stance as well as just as well as one
Jedi
of our
anti the Jedi.
Yeah, are you pro Jedi? Are you anti Jedi?
Yeah.
And that's going to be complicated by, you know, have you been told stories that are pro Jedi or anti Jedi? Have you grown up revering the Jedi and their mythical powers, or have you
socialize with people who are, you know?
Or have you been told the horror stories of the Jedi? Are they heroes to you, or are they bloodthirsty, elitist, like
tyrants,
mystery wizard, tyrannical, like bloodsuckers, like sitting in their temple on Coruscant and like using the Force to meld minds and stuff? So I think there's a great deal of difference and a great deal of possibilities of what different people imagine the Jedi to be, and I think that's how we see the Jedi get treated.
There's that
so
idea of
differently
of, you know, the galaxy finds out pretty early that Dooku was once a Jedi, and depending on who you thought that said more about is your political stance. You know what I mean? It's like, do you think that if you think that says more about Dooku, then you're pro Jedi. If you think it says more about the Jedi, then you're anti Jedi. You know what I mean?
Exactly, and I think it's not hard if we're going to take a deep dive into the politics of this. I think it's going to be it's not hard to imagine that this was a big selling point for many for Dooku, and something that got Dooku popularity was the fact that, in a lot of people who are maybe more pre-Jedi-ist, if I can bring up your word, Eli, I don't have a very hard time imagining that Dooku probably gained a lot of popularity in part by kind of confirming people's biases about the Jedi, and people who already didn't trust the Jedi, didn't like the Jedi, had some negative preconceived notions, saying, oh look, there's Dooku, he's renounced the Jedi, look at him, he's a big shot, like he's trustworthy, and to a lot of people Dooku was really a positive figure. Let's not forget,
he's calling out the BS of the Jedi, you know.
And they're saying like, oh look, he's like, the fact that he left proves everything I've thought about the Jedi. Which unfortunately this happens in the real world all the time.
That reverence of the Jedi, by the way, has caused me to invent a derivation of pre-Jedi-ice.
What is it?
Reverse pre-Jedi-ice.
Oh,
or I could call it positive pre-Jedi-ice. Have you heard of the term positive racism?
Positive racism. Would that be like,
if you say something about a group of people that sounds like it's good, but is actually just racist?
Oh, like the model are you talking about like the model minority myth?
Yes, I'm talking about
because really it's harm, even though it sounds like it's a compliment, it's actually still very harmful.
This is positive prejudice.
Yes, it is.
But you're a Jedi.
Yeah.
You should be better than you know what I mean?
And then that makes them disappointed when she says, I can't go rogue or whatever, you know?
It makes,
obviously, you know, I'm not trying to compare Star Wars. I'm not trying to compare someone not liking a Jedi in Star Wars to racism, but I think it's an interesting parallel to think about nonetheless.
I'm not trying to either. I'm just saying you can see it's an example to explain when I'm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you know, it's why Rey is so flabbergasted when Luke won't walk out and face the First Order with a laser sword, instantly after she talks to him on Ahch-To. First, I want to make a reference. Lagos, who's one of the cadets, has a bad feeling about this.
Really? Oh wow.
Yeah.
You must have
I
forgot
gravitate
that.
to that like nothing else. Also, what's the problem with the Mandalorian police force?
Yeah, they seem to have some real they seem to have some corruption issues for
Like,
sure, you know.
they suck. Both these two episodes, they suck. They're terrible at their jobs because half of them are turning against the interests of the Mandalorian society. You know what I mean? Half of them. It's
Yeah, well, I think that just goes
incredible.
to show how widespread, you know, abuse of power
Yeah.
can be, and also possibly some some of them are just getting maybe confused and misled because you know we have these two police officers, Mandalorian police, standing in front of the warehouse and saying to the captain of the police, "We've been ordered not to open it." Well, who ordered you? You know. So you
Yeah.
start to see kind of the tangled web, as it were. I think.
Yeah. Also, here's a question. Here's one of my biggest questions with this episode. Why does Satine dismiss the cadets?
I
It doesn't make sense to me. A good explanation for that question is never given to me. It's not why it's not, by the way, it's not why she doesn't want them handling it. It's why she appears to have done nothing afterwards. What's her plan? I want Admiral Holdo to tell me what's Satine's plan.
yeah. I mean, I think maybe Satine is trying to protect. I mean, you know, here's an idea. Look, earlier in the episode, you know, we see oh gosh, what's the prime minister's name? Almec,
Almec.
correct? We see Almec kind of fall under Satine's suspicion when she says he seems to care a lot more about the Death Watch and politics than he does about the kids. So I think there is a possibility. Maybe this is a stretch, but I think there's a possibility that she maybe suspected him and then was trying to keep the kids.
Here's another thing I just realized. This is a weird logistical problem. Ahsoka's teaching like an entire class of like 20 kids in there, right?
Yeah.
What are the other 16 kids doing when 4 of them admit to illegal break-in and, you know, like to like a government facility and like is just time just freezing for them? Why are none of them like doing anything?
It is a bit questionable when you're watching it, but you know.
Yeah. I mean, I understand it's like an animation model thing, but like seriously though.
Yeah.
So then Ahsoka leads the kids into capture. By the way, Ahsoka's so good at acting here. It's kind of crazy how good Star Wars characters are at acting sometimes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like she has to like confess to a traitorous government, and try to trick them, and she does that so incredibly well.
Although this is the episode where we get the iconic reaction meme image of Ahsoka rolling her eyes, so I think that is worth noting potentially. Definitely. And I do like that. I have to say I was a little disappointed to see how Ahsoka popped up in this episode because I was anticipating the redesign, but I was mistaken, and I think that actually happens. Both sides. Yeah, that actually happens. Heroes on both sides, which that's season 4, correct?
No, that's season 3.
Oh, so it's coming soon. Okay.
That is like 1 or 2 episodes from now. Let me check. Actually,
man. I'm looking forward to that.
I can tell you right now. Actually, that is 3 episodes from now.
Assassin. This episode is all about visions, as Yoda says. Impossible to predict. The future is. Always in motion is the future. I probably butchered that quote because I said future twice. I don't think that was what the intention was. But here we go. You know, Ahsoka, she has visions, and it turns out that she thinks Aurra Sing is still alive. And she thinks that Aurra Sing, or her visions think that Aurra Sing is going to try to assassinate Padme at this conference. So she goes with Padme as her bodyguard. Eventually, it turns out that yes, Aurra Sing is indeed still alive. She survived the crash. Hondo pulled her out of the wreckage. So, you know, we end up getting some some great assassination attempt action. Ahsoka twice actually defeats Aura Singh or prevents her from assassinating Padme, and Aura Singh she eventually gets the best of Aura Singh and saves the day for Padme.
Absolutely. Let's go to our fortune cookie. The future has many paths. Choose wisely. Star Wars is always about choosing your own destiny. And this episode's a good example of that, you know. That whole Anakin says yes, Luke says no thing that I mentioned a few episodes back applies here, you know. I need him. I am a Jedi like my father before me, and Rey Skywalker are all three about the choices that we are making to determine who we are and what our future is going to look like. Our destiny is determined by us. You know,
yeah.
Our destiny does not determine us. We determine our destiny. That's what this episode's about.
Absolutely. I think that you know, as Yoda says, always in motion the future is, and I think that's definitely the case here. And often in Star Wars, it seems as though when you act on a vision, you end up making it come true. Look at look at Anakin and the vision of Padme dying in childbirth. You know, he chooses the ability to save Padme instead of choosing Padme. Like, for crying out loud. It's
also, you gotta love the fact that this episode is about Ahsoka wanting to save Padme from dying, and Revenge of the Sith is about Anakin wanting to save Padme from dying. I'm just imagining Anakin going, talking to Padme about saving her from her nightmares from his nightmares in Revenge of the Sith, and Padme going, "Really, this shit again?"
Yeah. Oh my god.
Been there, done that.
Oh, dude. Yeah. Oh gosh. Oh my goodness.
Let's shout out my least favorite Star Wars trope of all time.
What is your least favorite trope of all time?
People coming back from the dead.
Oh my gosh.
Chronologically, it starts here. It goes
Wait, really?
Aura.
This is the first one.
Yeah. It goes Aura, Maul, Trench, Echo, Boba Fett, Phasma, Palpatine. That's the order that I got. Anyway, half of them are ridiculous. Sorry, most of them are ridiculous. There's only one that I actually, of all of those, buy. There's only one that I buy of all of those. And you're going to be shocked with which one it is.
Which one do you buy?
Palpatine is the only one that I buy. Because he's the only one powerful enough to save himself from dying.
Okay.
That's it. Because he's like, Darth Maul somehow survived being cut in half on his pain and anger. Really, you're gonna try and convince me of that?
He's a Sith Lord.
Yeah, but he's not really that powerful, is he? He's not
again. I'll say it again. He's a Sith Lord. That's my stance on it, I guess.
Okay, I don't know. We'll get to it when we get to it in season 4 of the Clone Wars. But in my opinion, if you think, I think it's a little ridiculous if people think Palpatine surviving was crazy, but then brush off Maul surviving like it was nothing, because they're basically the same to me.
Like, it's the opening kind of blends together, so we can kind of lump the first 10 minutes in.
Well, like, for example, I want to see Anakin's story on Baelith. I want to see Anakin stopping that civil war on Baelith. Did we ever get to see that? No. Do I want to see it? Yes. I also want to see that time on Canon Moidia and the swarm of Venomites on Raboon. Thank you very much. There should be a book series. There should be a new book series, which is just all of those references we made in the Clone Wars into actual adventures.
Personally, I'm not too shocked that Aura Singh comes back.
I'm not either.
I think I don't know. I mean, she definitely could have used more, like more episodes. I think that it would have been kind of a shame to cut her out of the story so soon, because I think she is a pretty unique.
So I think this is her last major episode in the Clone Wars, actually.
So, really?
Yeah.
Are you sure? I could have sworn there were a few more. Either way, I don't mind her presence. I think I don't.
No, I like her. She's
Yeah, I
good.
don't mind it.
We see that as much as Anakin is Ahsoka's older brother, Padme is Ahsoka's older sister, and something
Yeah.
that she really needs. Padme is under no obligation to like help Ahsoka with all of her struggles with all these visions, but she does it. You know what I mean? Every single time. Did you catch the score when they arrived on Alderaan?
I did. Yes, it was
Oh,
Princess Leia's
jeez.
theme,
It was
correct?
Leia's theme. I'm like,
Wow.
really, Kevin Kiner? You gotta hit me there?
Yeah, that was a. I thought that was a pretty great moment. Yeah, I forgot to mention that, but
It's like going to Tatooine and playing Binary Sunset.
yeah, really great moment.
You don't do that without just expecting me to be angry at you for your boldness.
I really like that they gave us a little taste of Alderaan because I think
Yeah,
for so long it was just this idyllic planet that we never really got to see, but it was just supposed to be so
yeah.
idyllic until they destroyed it. And
We got
you know,
to see
I
it
like
for
getting
like
to
2
see a little
seconds
bit of
in.
that.
We got to see it for 2 seconds in Sith, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not sure how much it appeared in Legends. Probably probably
More.
a bit, but yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, in canon, I guess we did get the Leia novel, which does a lot of that does take place on Alderaan. But you know, I don't think it's really the same as seeing it on the screen. And
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah.
I like how they work it in a little bit without trying to make it too much of a sob moment, big sad moment.
I gotta say, these assassination attempts, the way they're scored, the way they're shot, are some of the most beautiful sequences in like this season, just in general. I think, like the way, like we really get that sense of a thriller. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very suspenseful, I think, and they really do an excellent job of making us see kind of the fear and urgency that Ahsoka's going through, and how, like, to an outside perspective, it may seem like, oh, you're just being paranoid, but you know, these Force visions clearly they're very intense, and I think it just kind of reminds me to, you know, have empathy for people and their actions, because you never know what someone else is actually experiencing, and you never know how different people might manifest uh, stress or
Yeah.
worry.
By the way, why was Padme giving 2 speeches?
I mean, it was cool to see the decoy that they used, but in the end, I feel like it ended up not mattering that much because we ended up having
That's
the
not what I
bedroom
meant.
confrontation anyway.
That's
Oh,
what
that's
I'm.
not what you meant. What did you mean?
So there are 2 assassination attempts.
Yes,
Both times Padme's giving a speech.
yes.
What was the first speech?
What do you mean? It was a speech about
I know,
the
but
ghost.
that
I don't know.
wasn't her main like that. Then she says after that, "Oh, but the main event's coming up." What was
I
that first
guess
one?
I guess it was a warm up event. Maybe she was her own opener. Maybe she opened for herself. Maybe she's like, you know what, no one else is. I mean, clearly the Clone War. One thing that the Clone Wars really tries to impress upon us is that Padme Amidala seems to have almost supernatural public speaking and negotiation abilities. So maybe she
No,
just
she
thought to herself,
doesn't.
you know what? I know, but that's what they keep implying, even though they don't
Oh,
ever
that
show
keep
it really.
telling us. I see what you
Yeah, they
mean.
keep telling us, and you know, I think a few episodes ago we did kind of discuss how the Clone Wars does kind of break the show don't tell rule when it comes to Padme and her public speaking.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Um, yeah. I also love the line that Padme says that if you strike my voice down, know that a chorus of thousands shall rise up in its place. Did that sound familiar to you?
Oh yes, that
If you
definitely sounded
strike me
familiar to
down,
me.
I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine. So what we're saying is, between this and Hello There, Obi-Wan Kenobi is the biggest one-liner copycat in the entire galaxy.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah. Uh, I also love when Ahsoka says at the end of the episode, Ahsoka says to Padme that Aura Singh, the person who hired Aura Singh, wanted revenge on Padme for something that Padme did to them. You know that meme? Do you have any idea how little that narrows it down?
Yeah, that is exactly what
That
I
is
thought
the
of.
exact that Padme has done so many bad things to terrible people. Like that's her job at this
Yeah,
point.
it is. Like it seems like everyone has a chip on their shoulder about Padme. You have the Nemoidians of the Trade Federation. You have
Palpatine.
Hoggle the Lesser. You have even Palpatine, Dooku. Like
Literally
everyone is scared
everyone
of her.
is
Everyone is scared of her.
everyone hates her. Yeah. And then of course we find out that the person who hired Aurra Singh, or rather the creature that hired Aurra Singh, was indeed the infamous Ziro the Hutt.
Oh, Ziro. 000. So
Why we're getting him back again, I have no idea. How it's set up is beautiful, but like that it's happening is just terrible.
yeah. So remind me, Zero seems to be one of these characters that is really, really heavily caught in the crossfire of the confusing chronology of the Clone Wars.
Yes. So here's what this
that was a
sets
lot
up.
of C words in one
Yeah.
episode.
So here's what's happening, okay? Not this episode of In a Galaxy, but 2 episodes from now. This is episode 46. We're talking about episode 48.
Yeah.
Episode 48 are these 3 episodes. Evil Plans, which is season 3, episode 8. Hostage Crisis, which is season 1, episode 21. And Hunt for Ziro, which is season 3, episode 9. So it's basically mostly season 3, but there is an episode from season 1 stuck in there. Basically, Assassin, Evil Plans, and Hunt for Ziro are meant to explain why Ziro and Cad Bane held the Senate hostage in Hostage Crisis.
Yeah.
So don't think of Hostage Crisis as a badly placed episode. Think of Assassin, Hunt for Ziro, and Evil Plans as really bad exposition. Like really badly placed exposition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Think of it like the prequel trilogy. The prequel trilogy was exposition that was made after the fact. It's very confusing. I don't blame you.
Oh yeah. When Ahsoka is at the computer in the Jedi Library, the first criminal that she is scrolling through in the profiles is none other than Banamu.
Yeah, I saw
the little
that.
fish goblin who stole her lightsaber previously.
That might be racist, but we don't know.
Oh gosh, yes, it probably is. I apologize. The dark strip of makeup across Aurra Singh's eyes is supposed to be an homage to a character who I cannot remember the name of from Blade Runner, but I just remember reading that on Star Wars.
It's I know what you're talking about. It's played by Daryl Hannah.
It is played by Daryl Hannah, yes.
Pris is the name of the character.
Yes.
How would you rank these 3 episodes, Jacob?
That's a good question. I think they were all pretty equal to me, but they all had their different strengths. I think I would rank Assassin first.
Interesting.
Then the Academy, then Corruption. But they are all very close.
Of course, you're going to be shocked that I'm completely different from you. Number 1, the Academy. Number 2, Corruption. Number 3, Assassin. Yeah. None of these were great, in my opinion. None of these were awesome. We're getting to some really good episodes, but none of these were incredible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's it for our main meat of the episode. Now we're getting to everyone's favorite part of In a Galaxy.
What you've brought me today is worth 1/4 portion.
Nice.
It's time for everyone's favorite part of the show. So, it would usually be this month. What we'd usually be doing, it would usually be this month. But we decided, we were bored, and so we wanted to do a quick rank from the episode we did with Pink Milk, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing. Jacob and I have both categories, and we're going to both talk about our top 5s in those categories. Jacob, why don't you do yours first?
All right. So, Eli, could you please give me your top 5 clone troopers?
Clone troopers. We're talking about Rex at number 1. I would say Rex at number 1, Wolf at number 2. I would say Echo at number 3. I would say Rex at number 1, Cutlaw Quain at number 2, Wolf at number 3. I would say, who was I gonna say? Echo at number 4 and Fives at number 5.
Nice.
Yeah, I figured that one out a little too late. What's yours? Top 5 pointer
for me. My number 1 would be Fives for sure. My number 2, it's got to be Rex. Number 3, I am going with. I'm gonna go with Waxer for number 3. Gotta love Waxer. Number 4, Gregor, and number 5, Cutlaw Quain.
Yes, my boy. Here's a fun one that's a little more specific, so you might have a little more time for this one. What are your top 5 Star Wars stories for world building?
Define Star Wars story.
Anything.
Top 5 Star Wars stories for world building. This is a good one. And number 5 for best world building. Really great question, by the way. I'm almost sad that I didn't have more time to think about this. My number 5 would have to be Attack of the Clones.
Interesting.
I think that this really has a lot of world building. I think the nightclub scene is really awesome. A lot of people don't like the politics of this, and admittedly, there maybe is a little more
not about the
walking
plot,
and
the world building. So
yeah, I know, but I'm saying maybe there's a little more I'm getting there. Maybe there's a little more walking and talking than what would be necessary. But this does contribute to the amazing world building, and it's actually one of the things that I've really come around to really, really like about Attack of the Clones is how much it serves to expand the feel of the Star Wars universe and make it feel so much more large and expansive and complete. In number 4, The Phantom Menace, I think it does many of the same things that Attack of the Clone Wars. I almost said Attack of the Clone Wars. Attack of the Clones does. I think it does many of the same things. With the pod race, everything on Tatooine, a little bit Naboo as well, but really Tatooine. I think really just getting to see a little bit more of the lives of regular people, and seeing some of the intersections of many people. The Boonta Eve Classic, the marketplace, the Watto's home, Watto's shop,
Junkyard.
Anakin's home, the junkyard. Yeah, I think it all just getting to see kind of the day-to-day life really brought it to life for me.
Okay, yeah.
Number 3, this is going to be a group one because it's not just one story, but I think that the Star Wars Legends comics of the original trilogy era are just fantastic.
Interesting.
They are so good. I can just think of so many, just going to the library all the time, picking some out, just pouring through them and just not being able to put them down, and once I checked them out until the time that I finished them, and then I would go back and reread them again. I just loved something about them just really made the universe feel so complete for that time period, and they so perfectly complemented the feel of the original trilogy, and I really liked what they did. A lot of the Marvel era comics, I thought they're fantastic. My number 2 spot is going to be the Clone Wars. I think this one is a little bit self-explanatory. You get to see a lot of different planets.
I don't have it on my list, but okay.
Oh wow! Well, I'm excited to see what your list is going to have. And my number 1 spot, this may be a little surprising. It's got to be Rebels, because
go off.
Yeah. I'm about to go off. Warning: if you don't want to hear me rant about Rebels, just skip ahead a minute or so, and you'll be fine. Maybe 2 minutes. Who knows? I like Rebels because we spend so much more time on one planet, on Lothal, than we do in almost any other on-screen Star Wars media. Maybe period. Oh gosh, I really feel like we get to know Lothal.
I would tell you
and
the
its
Colossus,
people.
but okay, that's fine.
Okay, the Colossus. That is fair. But I get it. You have a
specific tie to Rebels, so
yeah. look, I love the Colossus. I love the Resistance for what it is, but for me, Rebels hits different. So I'm going with Rebels. I really think that we get an intimate look at the economy of Lothal, the way everything works, the people, the zeitgeist, and we see how much it changes between season 1 and season 4, and then the Rebels epilogue and the flashbacks. We get like 4 distinct looks at this one place. Yeah, it just feels like we get to intimately know this one community in
It's
Lothal
like
capital
Lothal's a
city.
character.
Yeah, it's like Lothal's a character. There you go. You said it better
Okay.
than I could.
My list is going to shock you in many ways.
I'm
but
looking forward to it.
I'm very
relishing
excited to tell
this.
you. Number 5, shocking pick for the first one: The Rise of Skywalker. Let's talk about
Wow.
world building. Let's talk about Exegol, the shadowy Sith world that's just so cool and so creepy. We get an entirely new look at the Sith in this almost gothic horror idea. We get the look at Pisana as this almost like, you know, it's, in my opinion, it's a different kind of desert planet. It's almost this like, it's like Tatooine, but it's almost a little bit more wild. You know, we got those like sinking fields and the Aki, and you know, we get to see all that stuff in there, and we get to see, you know, the snowy forests of Kijimi and the oceans of Kefir. There's some really interesting worlds in The Rise of Skywalker. Number 4, I'm surprised. Actually, I'm not surprised I didn't hear this from you, but okay. Number 4, Jedi Fallen Order. Talk about spending a lot of time places. The number of times I've gone through labyrinths on Zepho, or treaded through the forests of Kashyyyk, or gone in the underwater tunnels of Nur. That's some good stuff. You know what I mean? That's some really interesting planet development. Speaking of planet development, though, in video games, let's talk about Knights of the Old Republic, which is my number 3. The development of Terrace, the greater development of worlds like Tatooine and Kashyyyk, the development of worlds like Dantooine and Manan and Korriban. That's some really interesting development right there. I love how they develop Terrace and Korriban especially. There's some really good stuff there. Number 2, which I almost put at number 1, but I couldn't. Number 2, The Empire Strikes Back. A swamp world, an ice world, an asteroid field, the mouth of a giant space worm. These were concepts that a city in the clouds. These were concepts that until 1980 you couldn't imagine seeing in a Star Wars movie. And so Empire Strikes Back. Number 1, I don't think you should be surprised by this. I think you can probably see where this is where the list is going. A New Hope. If everything else on this list, everything else on your list too, pales, in my opinion, in comparison to A New Hope. Because they developed some interesting new planets. A New Hope developed an entire galaxy. So, in my opinion, you know, it's the... I don't like using this argument a lot, but you can't, like... You can't acknowledge this. A lot of people like New Hope best because it was the first one. And in terms of world building, I agree with that sentiment. In terms of other things, I don't agree, but like... In terms of world building, A New Hope built the galaxy. Empire and the Clone Wars and the other ones expanded the galaxy. A New Hope built the galaxy. You know what I mean? So, in my opinion, that is why it's the ultimate choice for world building.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with you on that one. I think you made a lot of good points, and I thought you had some really unexpected but great choices. Well done.
I was surprised with Attack of the Clones and Phantom. Though I agree on Phantom so much, actually. It's probably like 6 on that list. For me. Okay, that's gonna be it for this episode of Star Wars in the Galaxy. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoy listening to us talk about Star Wars, you can find us Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you listen to your podcast, we will be there. Follow us on Twitter at @InAGalaxyPod, Instagram at Star Wars in a Galaxy. You can find us on YouTube where we do some live streams and stuff. Please leave a 5-star rating and review. It really does help if you can. You can email us at swinagalaxy@gmail.com. And until next time, may the Force be with you. Always.